Mushin, a lively district in Lagos, is a place of contrast. Amidst the bustling streets where vendors shout to attract customers and downfall buses weave through narrow alleys, there lies a community brimming with resilience but also fraught with challenges. Within this vibrant backdrop live two children, Beo and Kikolomo, whose lives were about to take a turn that no one could have foreseen. Beo, a 13-year-old boy with a curious mind and a love for adventure, spent most of his days exploring the neighborhood. His quick smile and bright eyes reflected an innocence that had yet to be tainted by the world around him. Kikolomo, a year older, was his constant companion. Though more reserved than Beo, she possessed a quiet determination that often kept their misadventures in check. The two were inseparable, their laughter echoing through the streets as they played. Their parents, however, were often absent. Beo's father, Mr. Ayadil, worked long hours as a mechanic in a workshop across town. His mother, a petty trader, spent her days at the market, trying to make ends meet. Kikolomo's mother, a widow, sold fried snacks by the roadside, leaving early each morning and returning late at night. With no one to supervise them, Beo and Kikolomo roamed freely, their days filled with street games, idle chatter, and the occasional errand for a neighbor. Despite their independence, there were moments when their innocence shone through. Beo dreamed of becoming a pilot, often lying on his back to watch planes streak across the sky. Kikolomo, on the other hand, loved to sketch, using scraps of paper to draw scenes from their neighborhood. They were children with dreams, unblemished by the complexities of adulthood. But in Mushin, where life's pace is relentless, cracks in their carefree existence began to form. The streets, vibrant and alive, also harbored dangers. Older children, left to their devices, often acted as unintentional role models. These teens, hardened by their own struggles, were exposed to things far beyond their years. And without realizing it, Beo and Kikolomo began to follow in their footsteps. It started subtly. The older boys in the neighborhood would gather in corners, whispering and laughing about things Beo didn't quite understand. One day, out of curiosity, he joined them. They welcomed him with the camaraderie of older siblings but introduced him to things he had never encountered before. Meanwhile, Kikolomo found herself drawn to a group of girls who flaunted confidence and maturity, speaking about relationships and experiences that were foreign to her. Their parents, preoccupied with survival, failed to notice the shifts in their behavior. Beo and Kikolomo's long hours on the streets became routine, their innocence slowly giving way to influences they could barely comprehend. The seeds of change had been planted, but their parents remained oblivious, trusting that their children were simply being children. The bustling life of Mushin continued, but within its chaos, Beo and Kikolomo's paths began to diverge from the ones their parents had hoped for them. They were still children at heart, but the world around them was beginning to shape them in ways no one could foresee. The streets of Mushin, once a playground, became a labyrinth of discovery for Beo and Kikolomo. At first, their encounters with the older children were thrilling. Beo loved the feeling of being included in their secret conversations, while Kikolomo admired the confidence of the older girls. But what started as innocent admiration soon turned into something far more troubling. One fateful afternoon, while searching for scrap materials for a school project, Beo stumbled upon a tattered magazine tucked away in a pile of discarded items. Curious, he picked it up. The glossy pages contained images and content he didn't fully understand but found oddly fascinating. When he showed it to one of the older boys, they laughed and told him it was for adults. Intrigued by the mystery, Beo kept the magazine hidden, returning to it when no one was around. For Kikolomo, the turning point came during a visit to a friend's house. The friend, an older girl named Tosin, owned a smartphone, a luxury in their community. Tosin's phone became a gateway to videos and conversations that Kikolomo had never encountered before. Tosin's nonchalant attitude made it seem normal, and Kikolomo, eager to fit in, pretended to be unfazed. The older children's influence grew stronger. Beo, encouraged by the boys, began seeking out similar magazines and materials, often sharing his findings with them. They laughed and teased him, but their approval made him feel grown up. Kikolomo, meanwhile, found herself mimicking the older girls, adopting their language and gestures. She didn't fully understand their jokes or the implications of their conversations, but she played along, fearing exclusion. Their parents remained unaware of these changes. Mr. Ideal, exhausted from his long hours at the workshop, barely had the energy to ask Beo about his day. Kikolomo's mother, overwhelmed by the demands of her roadside business, assumed her daughter was safe as long as she returned home before dark. The absence of parental supervision created a vacuum that the streets of Mushin were all too ready to fill. As months passed, the children's behaviors became more noticeable. Beo, once a diligent student, began skipping school to spend time with the boys. His grades plummeted, but his parents dismissed it as a phase. Kikolomo, once shy and reserved, started wearing makeup and speaking in a manner that shocked her neighbors. Her mother, too busy to investigate, chalked it up to teenage rebellion. The turning point came when a teacher at their school noticed the change in both children. Concerned, she tried to reach out to their parents, but her warnings fell on deaf ears. "They're just growing up," Mr. Ayadil said dismissively. "Let them enjoy their youth." But the teacher knew better. She had seen too many children lose their way in Mushin, victims of neglect and misplaced priorities. Beo and Kikolomo were no longer the carefree children they once were. Their innocence had been replaced by a facade of maturity, but beneath it lay confusion and vulnerability. The streets had become their mentors, teaching them lessons they were too young to understand. And yet, their parents remained blind to the storm brewing in their children's lives. The consequences of Beo and Kikolomo's exposure to the adult world became apparent in dramatic fashion. One evening, Beo's father received a call from a neighbor informing him that his son had been caught at a party with older boys, engaging in activities that shocked the community. When Mr. Ideal arrived, he found Beo surrounded by empty bottles and cigarette butts, his eyes clouded with guilt and shame. Kikolomo's moment of reckoning came a few weeks later. Her mother discovered a series of messages on her daughter's phone from an older boy. The content of the messages was alarming, hinting at a relationship far beyond Kikolomo's years. Confronting her daughter, Kikolomo's mother was met with tears and a confession that shattered her heart. The community's judgment was swift. Neighbors whispered about the wayward children and the parents who had failed them. For Beo and Kikolomo, the shame was unbearable. They avoided their peers, unable to face the stares and whispers. But for their parents, the guilt was even greater. They realized, too late, that their neglect had allowed their children to drift into dangerous territory. Determined to make amends, both families sought help. Beo's father enrolled him in counseling, while Kikolomo's mother turned to her church for guidance. Slowly, the children began to heal. Beo returned to school, focusing on his studies with renewed determination. Kikolomo, encouraged by her mother, rediscovered her love for drawing, using art as an outlet for her emotions. The road to recovery was long and fraught with challenges. The scars of their experiences remained, but with time and support, Beo and Kikolomo began to rebuild their lives. Their parents, now more present and attentive, vowed never to repeat their mistakes. They learned that parenting is not just about providing food and shelter but about being actively involved in their children's lives. In the end, Beo and Kikolomo's story became a cautionary tale in their community. It served as a reminder of the dangers of neglect and the importance of parental involvement. Through their struggles, they found a path to redemption, proving that even in the face of failure, it is never too late to change course.